Let me ask you something. How many courses, mentorships, or coaches have you bought in the last 12 months? How many podcasts have you listened to? YouTube videos have you watched? Books have you read about scaling your business, building systems, finding the right hire, growing to the next level? And now let me ask you a more important question. How much of your revenue has actually changed because any of it? If you're honest with yourself, probably not much, maybe just a little bit. Maybe you had a good month and convinced yourself the information finally clicked, and then 3 weeks later, you were back at the same number, running the same patterns, deferring the same tasks. I'm not saying the information was wrong here. Most of what you've consumed is probably correct. The strategy is fine, the systems make sense, the advice is very solid, and it still didn't move the needle. And the actual reason, is not what you've been told. It's not that you need better or different information. It's not that you haven't found the right strategy yet. It's not a time problem or team problem or focus problem. The reason is that every strategy you've ever implemented has been running on top of a subconscious identity program that you haven't touched down here. And that program, the one installed before you were 7 years old, shaped by everything you've experienced, everything you've heard, everything you were told about who you are and what you're capable of, that program has been quietly making the final call every decision you've made since then, including the decisions to keep things exactly where they are. I want you to think about the last time you knew exactly what to do and didn't do it. The content didn't get created, for example, the price didn't get raised, the hire didn't happen. The high leverage work that would actually move your business forward got pushed to tomorrow. Again. So researchers at Stanford named this the knowing/doing gap. They spent years studying organizations full of intelligent, motivated, well-informed people who consistently failed to act on what they actually knew. Their conclusion was very direct. The gap between knowing and doing is not a knowledge problem. Knowledge is the least reliable predictor of behavior. What actually predicts behavior is identity, specifically who you believe you are at the subconscious level, so who your subconscious has filed as the current settled operating version of yourself. And now, I haven't heard anyone say this about the subconscious, so I'm going to. It doesn't work towards your goals, it works towards consistency with your identity. Its entire function is to make sure that what you do, what you earn, what you allow yourself to have, what you believe is possible, all of it stays consistent with the self-concept it's been running since your childhood. And if your results ever start to exceed that self-concept, the subconscious just corrects everything. And it doesn't do it consciously. You're not sitting there deciding to self-sabotage. That would just be stupid. The correction shows up as the procrastination you can't really explain, the sudden urgency that appears every time you're about to do something important, the self-doubt that arrives the moment something starts working. You've been trying to change your results with information and strategy and willpower, and those are all tools at the conscious layer. But the program determining your results lives in the subconscious. So for example, you have your conscious up here and then your subconscious down here. And tools at the conscious layer cannot reach the subconscious layer. That's the gap very few people are talking about, from the conscious to the subconscious. The gap between your current results and the identity your subconscious is still running. So let me show you exactly what that looks like. So think about a thermostat. A thermostat has one job, which is to maintain the temperature it's been set to. You walk into a cold room and the heating kicks in. You walk into a room that's too warm and the air conditioning kicks in. The thermostat doesn't care what temperature you would prefer the room to be. It just enforces the set points it's been giving from the start. Your subconscious identity is a thermostat with a set point. The set point is the internal reference for what feels normal, safe, and consistent with who you are. So your income, your team size, your visibility, your authority, all of it has a set point just like your subconscious. And when your results start to exceed that set point, the system just activates exactly like a thermostat and starts correcting back down, back to the number it knows and feels safe to, back to the patterns it recognizes, back to the version of you it was programmed to maintain. This is why operators with the right strategy, the right offer, the right team still find themselves at the same revenue month after month. Maybe they have a good month, then they have a panic month, a breakthrough, then a pullback. The strategy doesn't fail you. The set point just pulled you back to a level it thought was safe and you had actually given it. Let me give you another example. For example, a rubber band. You can stretch a rubber band. You can stretch it as far as your arm can reach. But the moment you just let it go, it returns to exactly the shape it was before. That's not a malfunction, but that's just what rubber bands do. The question is what the rubber band is made of. The entrepreneurs who keep breaking through to the next level, who hit a new level and just stay there, aren't pulling the rubber band harder than anyone else. They've just changed what the rubber band is made of. They've changed the set point from the start. The identity expanded to include the new level, so the new level became the baseline. There's no snapback because there's nothing pulling it back. If none of those made sense, these examples, let me give you a third example. A GPS navigation system. So you open your GPS and you type in a destination. Then you get distracted. You take a wrong turn, you end up somewhere completely different. What does this GPS do? It doesn't panic, it doesn't give up. It says recalculating. And it starts routing back to the destination you just entered. Your subconscious works the same way, except the destination it keeps routing you back to isn't where you want to go. It's where you've already been. The last saved location, the income level, the identity, the self-concept that was set years ago and never updated. Every time you try to move forward using willpower or accountability or new information, the subconscious GPS just recalculates, pulls you back, and the reason it pulls you back is because that's exactly what it was designed to do. Maintain the last known location until the destination itself gets changed. And the only way to change the destination isn't to pull harder against it or to push harder against it. It's to access the system where the destination is stored and update the file directly in that destination. That system is the subconscious mind. And the doorway into it, the only proven mechanism for accessing it while you're awake and aware, is hypnosis. But before I get to that and explain more about hypnosis, I need to show you the science behind why the subconscious is running your business in the first place. Because if you don't understand the mechanism, you won't believe the solution I'm going to give to you. So in 2005, neuroscientist Moran Curve, I think I pronounced that correctly, who has spent years of his career studying decision making at the brain level, found something that should have rewritten the self-help industry. By the time you are consciously aware of making a decision, your brain has already been preparing that decision for up to 10 seconds in advance. The decision feels like yours. It feels conscious, deliberate, or chosen. But the subconscious made it before your conscious mind even knew a decision was happening. This isn't just a one-time science thing. The neuroscientist Benjamin Libet, again, I think I pronounced that correctly, demonstrated the same finding decades earlier. That unconscious neural activity precedes conscious awareness of intention by hundreds of milliseconds. Your conscious mind doesn't initiate action, it narrates it. So, conservative estimates from neuroscience put unconscious brain activity at somewhere between 95 to 98% of total cognitive processing. What you're consciously thinking, so the strategy, the plans, the intentions, that's the 2 to 5% sitting on top of the rest down here. So the 95 to 98% running below the 2 to 5% is what actually produces your behavior. And what's running in that 95% is your subconscious mind, but also your self-conscious concept in your subconscious mind. The deeply stored set of beliefs about who you are, what you're capable of, what you deserve, what level of success is available to someone like you, installed primarily before the age of 7, but also throughout your childhood, your teenage years, and also in your 20s or 30s, wherever you are, throughout your life, running automatically without your conscious anticipation. You might have heard about this guy before, which I'm about to mention, Maxwell Maltz, a plastic surgeon working in the mid-20th century, was one of the first to document this precisely. He would perform reconstructive surgery on patients, correcting deformities, removing scars, objectively transforming how they looked. And then he noticed something that he couldn't explain as a surgeon. Many of his patients couldn't see the change he had just helped them achieve. He had one patient, a woman who had lived with severe facial scarring for years. The surgery was very successful, objectively, measurably successful. She was, by any external standard, transformed. And for months afterwards, she avoided mirrors. She still believed she was ugly, because the surgery had changed her face but hadn't touched her self-image. And the self-image, the subconscious identity file, was what her brain was using to interpret what she saw. Maxwell Maltz documented this across hundreds of patients and drew the conclusion that would become the foundation of modern performance psychology. The brain does not respond to objective reality. It responds to the self-image it's running. And until the self-image changes, external reality, no matter how objectively different, gets filtered back through the old lens. Now apply this directly to your business. You can have the right offer, you can have the right clients, you can have a team, a system, a strategy that objectively works. And if your subconscious self-concept, the identity file that was installed when you were 7 years old, reinforced every time you played it safe, every time you made yourself indispensable, every time you decided no one could do it like you, if that file still says you are an operator and not an owner, then every piece of strategy you implement will get filtered through that old lens. Just like you have a pair of glasses on, for example, and you see different because there is a different lens that obviously match your eyesight. And the business will keep recalculating back to where the self-concept says it belongs. This is not some woo-woo motivational framing. This is actually what the research shows. There's a study from the University of Scranton tracking people who made formal resolutions, committed intentional decisions to change a specific behavior. After 1 week, 75% were still on track. After 2 weeks, the number dropped. After 4 weeks or a month, more than half had returned to the original behavior. After 6 months, 54% had failed entirely. And it wasn't because the desired behavior was unclear, but because the identity behind the behavior hadn't changed. You don't have a strategy problem, you have an identity problem. And you can't fix an identity problem with a strategy. Surprise, surprise. So here's how I know that. So I worked with Dominic about 3 months ago, and he came to me running a business at a level that made really good sense on paper. He had clients, he had good revenue, he was working constantly, and he had been stuck at the same income for months because there was a subconscious ceiling on what he believed he was allowed to earn. A set point that had nothing to do with his capability and everything to do with his identity. In fact, he was so capable, he knew so much, he delivered so good results for his clients, but for some reason there was something from his past that had given him an experience and to his nervous system and his subconscious mind that says you are only allowed to earn X amount. 8 weeks after we started working together on the subconscious layer, he had doubled his income. So he went from low 5 figures to double that. So significantly higher every single month. And he wasn't able to do that because he was only able to do that because the version of him running the business changed. Let me give you another example. So for example, my client Carlo, which I also worked with at the same time I helped Dominic, Carlo had a different block. His was around hiring, specifically the discomfort that showed up every time he would have to let go of a task because he knew he had to prioritize more important tasks. It was a stored identity reference that said, people like me do everything ourselves. Whatever level of success he was trying to delegate for felt unsafe at the subconscious level. 5 days after a single focused hypnosis session targeted that specific reference, 5 days he made 11,000 euros, and he had a record week, and he had the best week and month he had had in months, maybe even years since he started his business. And that was again only because we targeted something that his subconscious, which is, as I said before, running 95 to 98% of all of your behavior, was set at a specific point or had a specific experience that only allowed him to get to a certain point. The next client, which I'm going to talk about, is James. James scaled his monthly recurring revenue by 30% in 56 days by removing the subconscious block that had been moderating his growth for over a year. In every one of these 3 cases, the strategy was already in place. The capability was already there. The only thing that changed was the identity program running behind all of it. And here's the critical thing I need you to understand now. None of these results came from motivation, accountability, journaling, or willpower. They came from updating a file that lives somewhere those tools cannot reach. I want to be direct about why the standard solutions don't work at the subconscious level. Most of them are valuable, but none of them operate at the layer where the actual problem lives. Willpower is a conscious resource. Researchers at Stanford found it depletes like a muscle. It gets used across the day, which is why you make your worst decisions at night usually. But more importantly, willpower is a force you apply against a resistance. So the subconscious identity program is the resistance here. You can override it with willpower temporarily, but the program is still running. The moment the willpower is gone, the program just takes back over immediately. This is the mechanism behind every relapse, every plateau, every I was doing so well and then I stopped. So if we just take the conscious layer tools and walk through them one by one, so accountability, which I mentioned just earlier, does something slightly different. It adds social pressure as a motivational force, and social pressure can drive behavior in the short term. But you've probably experienced this. You commit publicly to something, you do it while the eyes are on you, and 6 weeks later, when the group accountability fades, the behavior just fades with it. Because accountability changes what you do, it doesn't change who you believe you are. And behavior driven by external pressure always return to an internal identity the moment the pressure lifts. More information, courses, podcasts is perhaps the most expensive trap at this stage where you are at, because at your level you are not underinformed. You have so much information. You probably already know more about business systems and growth strategy than most people you'd pay for coaching does. The gap is not between what you know and what's possible. The gap is between what you know and what your identity allows you to consistently execute. Adding more information to that gap doesn't close it, it just widens it. You end up knowing more things you're not doing, which is quietly just humiliating you, because you're thinking, I have all of this information, but I still can't seem to act on it. And this is probably a little bit embarrassing to myself that I have the information, I've paid so much money to actually receive the information, and I've used so much of my time, but I still can't implement it, even though I know it will work. And then we have affirmations, spoken in the mirror in the morning, written in journals, repeated in your head. these work on the conscious layer. They introduce new information, but the subconscious doesn't receive information consciously. It receives it through a completely different channel. And until you understand how that channel works, how to access it, you're talking at a locked door. The locked door is the identity. The key here is hypnosis. Here's exactly what I mean by saying that. Most people hear hypnosis and picture a stage performer making a volunteer cluck like a chicken or whatever. That's just entertainment. What I'm describing is very different here. And the distinction matters because the science behind it is what separates it from everything I've just described as insufficient. So the American Psychological Association formally recognizes hypnosis as a legitimate intervention tool. There are over 13,000 published studies on hypnotic effects in peer-reviewed literature. So the research covers everything from pain management to anxiety disorders, trauma processing, and directly relevant to you, behavioral change at the identity level. So this is what hypnosis actually is. Hypnosis is where your brain operates across a specific spectrum of electrical states. I'll reformulate that. Your brain just operates across a spectrum of electrical states. When you are alert, working, responding to messages, it's operating at the beta state. When you're calm, relaxed, engaged in light creative work, that's the alpha state. And when you go deeper than that, the state of deep meditation or daydreaming would probably be a better example. That's the theta state. Theta is where the subconscious becomes directly accessible. In ordinary waking life, there's a layer of analytical processing that sits between incoming information and the subconscious. It filters, evaluates, challenges, it's protective, and it's exactly why the conscious layer tools like affirmations and willpower can't reach the identity program underneath them. The analytical layer catches them before they actually have time to stick. In the theta state, that layer just quiets. The critical analytical function reduces and the subconscious becomes receptive to direct input in a way it simply isn't in beta or even alpha states. Hypnosis is the deliberate induction of the theta state followed by targeted suggestion work. I know this sounds a bit grandiose and maybe a little bit, well, is this really for me? Would it really work? But it's not that you're unconscious. It's not that you're not under control or that someone else controls your mind. You're just in a state of focused, narrowed attention, more aware than usual of your internal experience and less defended against input that would normally get filtered before it reaches the layer that matters, which is your subconscious mind. Think of it like a software update. Your conscious mind is the user interface, the part you interact with that you're aware of. The subconscious identity program is the operating system running below the software update. You can change what's on the screen all you want, but if you want to update the operating system, you have to stop running all the applications, let the system idle, and install the update at the level of the OS directly. Hypnosis is the process of idling the system and installing the update. And here's the specific thing it can do that nothing else can. It can directly target the identity reference points, which is the stored self-concept that's been setting your ceiling and then update them and then dissolving the ceiling without information or motivation, but with a new identity file that the subconscious accepts as true because it was received through the channel the subconscious actually uses. Dominic's income ceiling didn't move because he worked harder. It moved because the identity file that was enforcing the ceiling got updated. Carlos' delegation block didn't dissolve because he worked harder or more. It dissolved because the stored reference that made delegation feel unsafe got replaced with one that made it feel like the natural output of who he is. The mechanism is the same every time. You don't change the results by pushing harder against the ceiling. It's just like hitting a wall. You dissolve the ceiling by updating the identity that was holding it in place. Here's what I want you to take away from this video as something you can actually act on today. Number one, identify your identity ceiling. Not just I want more money. That's an outcome. The ceiling is the identity statement behind the outcome. It usually sounds like one of these. I have to be involved in everything for it to be done right. I can't charge that because clients will leave. I'm not the kind of person who ... Fill in the blank. Whatever comes after that sentence is your ceiling. Write it down, because naming it consciously is the first step to separating yourself from it. Because you are not that belief. You're the person who has been running it. There's a difference. Second, understand that the solution operates at the subconscious level, not the strategy level. The next course you buy is not going to move the needle if the identity behind hasn't changed first. I'm not telling you to stop learning. I'm telling you to stop expecting learning to do what only identity work can do. Third, start doing the work at the level where the work actually matters, the subconscious level. Very simple, use self-hypnosis. You can find many different videos on how to do self-hypnosis. You can also find it on my Instagram, which is down below in the description, which you can find in there, how to do self-hypnosis and actually start changing what actually matters, the self-concept, the self-image, your subconscious mind, and what it has as set as a reference point. Because you already know what to do. The question was never the strategy, it was always the identity. Now you know where to start.